inviting me to come to speak today. I definitely appreciate the time and the opportunity. I wanted to just start off kind of giving a little bit of a history of kind of how we got to where we are. It's been about a year-long process that we've been engaged in. It started back in early August of last year when the health department did finally come out. They did their routine health inspection. Had a couple of new health inspectors, and they changed some of the regulations that kind of led to several of these deficiencies being brought up and noted, and then they did require us to close the pool effective immediately. After that, about 2 weeks after that, the process began of contact with the Department of Health, organizing a plan of action and what needed to be done. And then over the next several months, there were conversations with a couple of different engineering firms that specialized in pool construction. Came out based on what the Department of Health had said, that here's the plan and the plan of action we think we should be taking. And then those plans were ultimately presented to the Department of Health. After, I think it was 1 or 2 revisions, the Department of Health finally accepted the plan. What our plan was that we had a certain list of items that were completed prior to opening this year. Part of why there was a delay in opening for this year that would allow us to open the pool for this year. And then phase 2 of the plan is the actual correction of the issues with the pool basin itself. And then phase 3 is the remediation of the bathhouse. Now with this GO bond measure, that covers the entire project, phase 1, well, phase 2 and 3. Phase 1 is already completed. We had a lot of discussion on what's the best way to fund this. How can we fund this? What are our options? Because unfortunately, the estimates are coming in at just way more money than we have available to put towards the project. So there were a couple of options we could do that have been brought up. We could do a sales tax increase. We could do a utility rate increase, a fee, or a bond measure. We did not feel like a utility rate increase was appropriate for a number of reasons. One being we've already just went through one of those to fund a lot of our water infrastructure projects. 2, it's about the only option we have that unanimously as a council we could make happen without any involvement of the electorate. And I was not in favor of that. Several others were not in favor of that. We did not feel like or at least I'm going to say, I personally did not feel like, this was my argument against a sales tax increase, was that because of the volatility in sales tax, it's not an easy tax to put it into. So when you have a definite amount for a project, there's no way to say we're going to, in 10 years, end this. That's what the GO bond ultimately allows us to do, is say in 10 years this will end because of the relative stability in property tax. The other big benefit to that is like I said, it's an option that lets us go, as we're doing, through a ballot measure, because it's required that it go as a ballot measure to the people. So that's ultimately how we got to where we felt like a GO bond was the best option, that we all could actually get around and agree. I will say we're asking for $2.5 million in the GO bond. At this point, the vast majority of that funding is primarily necessary to secure alternate forms of funding. So we're going after the largest other form of funding that we do have available that we're going after is I believe it's Land Water Conservation Fund that we're going after. They have awarded grants in the past. It's an almost limitless grant. It's a very competitive grant in the event that there's very stringent requirements on it, but we actually meet those requirements, which means the guarantee of funds is much higher than a lot of other grant opportunities that are out there. And it's a 50-50 matching grant. We're requesting $3.8 million, which means we have to come up with $1.9 million in matching funds. Now, where the $3.8 million figure comes from is that's the maximum of the engineer estimates of the cost of the project. We do not believe that it's going to be anywhere near $3.8 million, and I'll go into reasons for that in just a moment. But it does require $1.9 million in matching funds. Those matching funds for that $3.8 million can come from any source of matching, whether that be the GO bond, donations, like-kind work, etc. The downside to that is that as part of the scoring measure for the grant, it's a matter of do we have the financing already available, the cash for that 1.9 already available. So that's really a big part of what we're looking for in that GO bond is we have the cash on hand for the grant at this point. Now, how we believe we can get the project down from that $3.8 million to more what we feel was a $2.5 million target project cost comes from the fact that there's a lot of areas that we feel we can self-perform work on that the engineer does not take account for. The lighting is part of that estimate. The lighting is primarily already in place, so there's very little work that, from my understanding, that needs to be accomplished there. They put in the estimate $60,000 for a fence. That's a big one that we keep, but there's just no way it's going to cost us $60,000 to put a fence around the pool. We know we can get that done cheaper. So with all of those, yeah.
Are we going to remodel or rebuild the existing pool or build a new pool from scratch?
The plan that we presented at this point is that it would be building a new pool from scratch because the difference in cost was negligible.
So we're going to take the old pool out and level the side and then build a new pool on the same side?
Correct.
Except for the bathhouse and the pavilion.
Right. The bathhouse and pavilion will stay, and the interior of the bathhouse is being remodeled.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, will that, the money that you're including, will that include using the machinery to get in there and rebuild up that property that's fallen off to the north?
Does the cost include that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The cost does include the going in and leveling out the dirt work that's there, doing the backfill that's necessary, and then shoring it up to hopefully prevent the settling from happening again, or at least not as quickly.
Will it be the same size as the existing pool or smaller or larger?
It is smaller. The proposed design is smaller than what the current pool is. I want to say that it's a little over half the size of what the current pool is.
What are you don't have the existing dimensions and new dimensions?
I didn't think to bring them with me. I can actually pull them up on my phone. I meant to print this up out, but I do have those documents in my email. Give me just a moment. I should have printed that.
I'm a little confused, I'm sorry. If we come up with 1.9 million, and then the grant will provide another 1.9 for the total of 3.8.
Correct. Correct. So we would, in that point, we would have additional funds if the project were to go over budget. There was discussion on if we would even request the full 1.9 million and then the match of 1.9. But it was ultimately decided that if we have the extra funding there available, then if the project goes over the budget, then we're covered. And it's basically free money sitting on the table to take. So if we do come in under budget, then it allows us to expand the project even further.
Those funds are going to have to be used for this project.
Those funds do have to be used for this project, and the matching funds do.
It's not bothering you can finish pulling it up.
Let me check here. Had it right. I don't have the dimensions, but the existing pool is 500,000 gallons. I think the new pool came up to around, it's not in this document, I think it was 200,000 to 300,000. One of the questions that I've been asked came up with, since we are going to a smaller pool, what ends up being capacity, because that was a big concern. And the new pool does have a capacity of 390 individuals in the pool at one time. I believe our highest occupancy that has gone through the gatehouse in a single day was 500. It doesn't mean they were all there at the same time or in the pool at the same time, but that's the highest we've gotten. It averages about 100 people who come and go to the pool during any given day. Yes, sir?
Will the price of the entry to the pool remain the same since it's being paid through bond if it passes?
There hasn't been a lot of discussion on that. I know I personally do not want to see it increased. We had discussed that initially prior to as a potential means of funding, but it just doesn't add a lot. The total revenues on the pool, I think, are around $19,000 as it currently sits. So even if we were to double that, it just doesn't make any dent in anything. So I can't speak for certain of everybody, but I do not support an increase in the price increase. Yes.
Hi. It has been implied that a lot of these problems just kind of happen. And I've talked to a former director of the swimming pool who claims when she worked there, she sent memos every summer that she was the manager to the city manager about the problems at the pool, and nothing was done except to let the problem build. I don't hold you responsible, but I do hold the city manager responsible for allowing this to happen. It may be a slow process. I have an emotional commitment to the pool, but I'm worried about senior citizens on limited incomes. I've heard a lot of people who own rental property almost screaming what that's going to do to them and their property taxes. And at one time when I retired and came home, people said Al had one of the highest sales taxes in the area. Well, now I hear Cherokee is higher, or maybe even Winoka is higher than Alva. So maybe people would, what really has me upset was the attitude and it was not against you, at the public hearing of the black or white. We either do this or there is no pool, forget it. And I felt that was a slap in the face to the people of Alva.
And that's contradictory to what I've said the entire time with this. I feel like we should do what we can to make the pool happen. I feel like if this doesn't pass, it does delay the project even further because we've got to go through all of the planning process again. I personally do not support a sales tax increase for the project. I don't believe that that's the best direction to go, primarily because of the fact that there's no guaranteed way to get it. With the bond measure, we have a much clearer line in the sand that in 10 years that this tax goes away. That was one of the big things that I pushed for. Is I didn't like the fact that if we did a sales tax, it could be 15, 20 years. At the end of the project, it's how sales tax works. It could easily just be turned over to another project. And I didn't like that. This is very concrete. It's for the pool. 100% of the funds are allocated to the pool. That's all it can be used for. And when it's completed, and that $2.5 million is paid off, it's done. So that's probably the biggest benefit to this.
Do you have an estimate of how much this is going to mean, let's say, on a $100,000 house?
Yes. So roughly, at the PICA, it's a little bit complicated because how the mill levy plays out. But at the peak, at the highest rate that it'll hit, which would be the 2021 tax year, it comes out to about $100 per 100,000 in assessed value. If you take out, because I know you mentioned the landlords, if you take out the homestead exemption, which is the primary thing that impacts landlords with the exception of apartment complexes, regardless of the value, that adds an additional $90 per year. So if you have a $100,000 house that you're renting, but you don't get the homestead exemption, it's $190 for the year, roughly, at the peak. Yes, sir.
Going along the same lines, I'm outside city limits. I can't vote on this. Is it going to affect my property taxes since taxes for homes are based on the price of comparable homes in the area?
It will not impact your property tax because that mill levy is not going to be assessed on you. For any property outside of city limits, the mill levy is not assessed on.
But you don't have to be a property owner to vote. It's a registered voter to vote in this.
Correct. If you're a registered voter, you can vote whether you're a property owner or not.
But it's only city of Alva, is that correct?
It is only the city of Alva. Yes, you have to be a registered voter within the corporate city limits of Alva. Yes, sir.
What brought this all about suddenly like this? Back in the 1990s, I was the pool inspector for the state, and I knew what problems the pool had at the time, and I had to close it once in a while for one reason or another. But it doesn't seem to me it suddenly changed that much. What was it that brought this to a head?
My understanding was that we had a new health inspector.
Yeah, that's what brought it to a head, probably.
Basically fresh out of school. I don't know exactly what all they have to do to go to that, but and so that's kind of what they're saying. We haven't had any issues show up from what I've been told. I can't say I've seen any of the past inspections, but from what I've been told, there haven't been any major issues noted on any of the inspection reports up until August of last year.
Did the engineers from the state actually come up here and inspect the pool and examine it?
It's done by the Department of Health.
Yes, I know that, but they have a whole division of engineers that deals only with pools.
Yeah.
Then I have not been made aware of that.
Did the city receive a consent order from the state to do something?
Not that I'm aware of.
That's the way the state orders towns to do something when they have a serious problem that needs attention.
Then I would presume that that was done, but I haven't seen it. I've seen the actual health inspector report. It does show that it was asked to be closed, and then I know we were notified that it had to be closed.
Was it asked to be closed permanently or just temporarily?
My understanding is that it was asked to be permanently closed until the issues were rectified.
Now, they did put in a new, sewer drain or drain?
There were a few things that were, as part of the phase 1 of the project, that were completed. One of those was that it needed a new pump. It needed some life preservers that had to be replaced or added to. There were several small things that were completed this last year as part of phase 1 of the project.
They put in a drain, did they connect it to the?
Yes.
The line they put in, was that a sewer drain? What was that?
Yeah, so up until this year, when the pool was drained, it was drained down into the city pond, the park pond there. And the Department of Environmental Quality apparently does not allow that any longer, and required that it be plumbed into the city sewer system. So they have since plumbed it into the city sewer system, so when it's drained into that. Yes, sir.
What were the specific dangers to health and safety that they mentioned that would require the pool to be closed?
So the biggest issue that the pool has is that the pool basin itself is settled. And as part of that settling, it's not causing the water to lack over into the skim ring around the edge to be circulated through the pump, rechlorinated, filtered out. So the chlorine levels were not being maintained at an adequate level. Actually, when they came to inspect it, the free chlorine level was at 0 parts per million. So there was absolutely no registerable chlorine in the pool. So
The water going over into the gutters would not affect that, however. That water going into the gutters is the water that's going down the drain. So that wouldn't affect the chlorine level. Can we actually see the health inspection reports on this? Are they available to the public?
yeah, I believe all of that documentation has been put on the city's website. I believe I've linked to it. I can find the link and before I leave, and I'll get it out.
You actually can't read the copy that's on the website, so I don't know if they can rescan the copy. It's like that weird yellow paper. It's really difficult. You
Yeah,
can't
it's a
really
harder
read what's
copy.
on it. Yeah.
Okay. I can definitely ask I'm sure that at the city offices, you can actually see the original that should be on file there as well.
Do you know when they'll award that grant, or when we'll know if we receive it?
So that was something I was going to mention, and then we got started with questions. So it was brought to our attention that the grant would not be awarded in time for the pool to open next year. So then we debated on how we shuffle around the project or what gets done about that. I believe both committees that were involved in that have met. I can't say that for certain, but I know that my understanding was they have. And the direction that they decided to go was that we would continue to apply for the grant. It would result in that we would not be able to open the pool for next year as originally planned and intended. But we didn't want to leave the money on the table. So, but it would be, I believe the awarding of it is May of next
Do
year.
they plan to try to finish a part of the project if the bond is complete, to have something open next year and then use the grant funding then to finish?
From my understanding, no.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So there's definitely nothing on the board that says anybody smart enough to go in there, seize it up, blow in underneath and blow air like they do for anything else, and push in the cement underneath for blocking, and then to go back inside and reshoot and line it. I mean, I've had Olympic-sized pools in my yard in Nevada. And that same thing has happened to it, and all I did was they shot air underneath there like they would any other thing, balloons, pick it up, and shoot in the cement with a tube, let it sit, and then in a month they'll go back in, and they shoot and recoat the whole inside of it. Then they put their tile up on their bar, and they're done. And I had it for 24 years.
Can I speak to that? My husband was heavily involved in Hartner's redo of their pool, and they opted for that, and they've paid for it ever since. It was incredibly costly, and it didn't work.
Why didn't it work?
So there's a lot of technical language. You could talk to my husband about it.
Okay, well, I
But it
know
was
the
a complete
technical
disaster.
from Las Vegas, Nevada. I think that we're not getting a full knowledge person into this territory to do what they're supposed to do. They want the full course money to pull that out. I'm still gonna vote yes, don't get me wrong. I'm voting yes. But I have asked so many people already, do we not have capable workers? Do we not? Are we given 3 to choose from for prices and that's all? Do we not get to ask what their knowledge is?
I know we were originally presented by by an engineering firm 5 different plans. That was then modified to provide the 6th plan, which is the plan that's being presented on the ballot. The engineering firm has also said, okay, so here's your options. You can repair the current pool in its current state to meet Department of Health requirements. And this is what it'll take to do that. Or we build a new pool, and this is what it'll take to do that. They presented us with what the cost on those were. When it was all said and done, and we went through and said, okay, well, we can decrease this cost here because we can self-perform this portion of it and so forth. A lot of what would have to be done to actually rehab the existing pool, we couldn't self-perform. It would have to be brought, someone would have to come in and do it to bring it up. So once we took that out, the difference in cost is, I believe, was around $200,000. And so when you're talking about a project that's in $2 million, it's about a 10% increase. And the amount seemed negligible enough that it made more sense to start over and build a new pool than try to fix what we had existing.
I understand all of that. I just wanted to know what the technology was and what their degree was. And I have one more question is, I don't know how much of that the other end that's sinking, how much of that territory, if we took that into the pool off, how small would that make the pool then? Because we're known for having a big pool here in Oklahoma, in Alva.
We currently have the 2nd largest pool in Oklahoma.
Yeah, okay.
Since now. So,
Yeah.
I honestly, I do not know the answer to that on how much of that would have to be taken off. My understanding is it's a significant portion, but I can't speak.
So it's over half then, or at least half of the
That's my
pool?
understanding,
Okay.
but I can't say that there's been any
Gotcha.
significant discussion around
Okay.
that.
Other than this recent public hearing, has the public been involved in any of these other options that were presented?
Yes, there were, other than the most recent that we held at the pool, there was at least one, I believe 2 other public hearings. Unfortunately, I don't believe anyone showed up, other than maybe a handful.
Really? Oh, thank you.
I was at 2 of them,
Okay.
so.
So yeah, there were people there,
So there were no one.
there weren't between who's there for the pool and who's just always there.
Okay, Daniel, one thing that has really confused me, a lot of things do, but on this issue, is you have referred to the architectural designs or their estimates. And I've heard people say, well, what about the bidding?
Mhm.
And I know if I go build a house, I go to a person, they draw it out, they don't say this is going to, how much this is going to cost, then you put it out for bidding. Why wasn't part of it put out for bidding? It was kind of, I thought I was being told, we can't bid this out until we actually know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yes. So when we go out for engineer estimates, the engineering itself hasn't actually been, it has, but we don't have the actual engineering plans before us to be able to then send it out for bid. So that part of the project costs us around $200,000 to actually engineer the plans for the pool. So if we go ahead and we engineer it out, we pay that $200,000 and then we put it out for bids, and then let's say the measure doesn't pass, or for whatever reason funding doesn't become available, particularly the measure doesn't pass, then we're out $200,000. The other side of that is typically when you go to buy a house, you have intent to buy. At this point in time, we don't have intent to buy because we don't have the funding available. We won't have intent to buy until we know that funding is available, which requires that either the measure pass or some other funding come up. By going out for bids prior to having funding, what has historically happened is that the bids come in higher than expected because they're putting in a lot of work with very little guarantee that the work actually gets performed or they're awarded the bid. And then they're less likely to come back and bid a project. Let's say it doesn't happen this year and we come back later in 2 or 3 years, they're less likely to bid the project at that point because they've already done it once and wasted their time and money to do it. It did not come to fruition.
You're basically saying we've got to have the money first before we can do this, in the bid.
Basically, we don't have to have the money first. It's just good prudent practice to have the money first in the event that if we're going to pay for the engineering, we want to make sure we can complete the project first.
And then my last question for right now. Winoka lost their pool a year ago. Now, and just through the grapevine, that they're now seriously considering how to get a pool back in Winoka because of the rapid increase in vandalism that's been happening down in Winoka by the kids. And I'm afraid if you take out the pool, that may encourage other things to go on. That's just a side statement.
And that's, it's definitely a possibility a lot of people mention is what happens if it's not there. Megan?
So you said before that we won't have a pool open next summer, which either outcome, we're not going to be able to do that. Has the city talked about, or are they prepared to talk about, with either outcome, the construction of a splash pad by next summer to get?
I know that there was some discussion on that. From my understanding, there were 2 different possibilities that were discussed. One of them being to expedite the splash pad that is planned out at the rec park. The other option being trying to find a way to put the splash pad portion of the pool project in at the park. So I'll address each of those separately. The one at the park, where the existing pool was ultimately decided that probably was not going to be a good move, because to be able to put it anywhere near where the pool is currently located would put it in the path of the construction project when the pool does in fact get built, which we hope and believe will happen at some point, some way or another. So the risk of damage to the splash pad there, as well as trying to maneuver around it or having people use it while it's right next to a construction zone, and the risk weight in that led them to decide, and I say them because I was not a part of that committee, but led them to decide that probably wasn't a feasible option. So then it was directed towards, well, what about doing it out at the ARC? As the ARC is funded differently, it would come out of the ARC funding to put the splash pad out there. And right now it was felt that there were other projects that are more critical to the structural integrity of the building and maintaining it. So I know that there was some pushback of doing it out there at this time, instead reserving the funds to, for the parking lot and or roof repair that is needing done out there. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, one jump back. Ahead of that, somebody brought up that they put it down to be looked at, to put it at the side over there by the courthouse and have it gated in, because at any time, when we have great big doings there and there, hot dog feeds or whatever, that if there was a card that you could buy, they could just slip that card in there and be paying for that to get money back, and it wouldn't be in the way, and no bigger. I don't think that you're gonna put in a big one, because those get a little expensive. So they can't bring anything into town, middle of town, huh?
Are you talking about the courthouse lawn?
Downtown.
Uh-huh. Downtown, somewhere downtown.
Okay.
But that's biggest area I could think of.
And that's about the only area I think that would be big enough, and that's actually county property, from my understanding.
What about the old armory property? Did anything consider putting it there? You know what I mean by old armory?
I believe so.
I mean where the,
School bus barn is.
I don't believe there was any discussion about putting it there, no.
But there will be a charge for it, won't there?
For the splash pad portion, the actual, and the long-term plan on that would be that it would be outside of the fenced area, because there is
Okay.
no standing water.
Okay,
It
I was
doesn't
told the
require
other.
lifeguards. So we would be able to actually make that available to the community at no cost
Oh, okay.
or more time than what the pool is actually open, later and earlier.
Okay.
So if you received donations that were earmarked or said that they were for the intention of the construction of a splash pad, would the city allow for city land to be used for it? Somewhere?
I can't speak on everyone's behalf. If the right property was available and the donations were there, I personally would be okay with that. Barring all of the other circumstances that can come into that, location of the property, other considerations, other future plans, etc. But I'm not sure where we would be able to put it, but it would be definitely something I would be willing and open-minded to do. Yes, sir.
I'm opposed to the GO bond idea, mostly because only the property owners would end up paying for it.
Mhm.
Most of the people with high dollar property are outside the city limits.
Mhm.
And only about 1/3 of the people in town are property owners too, so the other 2/3 get to go free.
no, they'll pay for it in their rent will go up.
Oh, sure, yeah, the rent will go up.
Thanks.
Their rent will go up.
That's nice.
The rental, people renting the property probably won't pay it, the people that are renting the property wind up paying it with the increase in rent.
Maybe the renters ought to go against the two in that case.
No, I think so.
And I can't speak to that. That's a business decision by the landlord on what they decide to do as far as raising their rent. It probably will increase for most people. Most landlords would probably increase their rent. But again, at its peak for $100,000 home, which I don't believe most of the homes being rented are $100,000. I could be wrong, but at its peak increase, it's $190 a year, so a little over $10 a month is what you're seeing in actual property tax increase.
How much of a sales tax increase would it take to fund this project?
Depending on how we extended it out, about a 1/2 cent sales tax comes up to about $1 million, I believe.
Half a cent?
A 1/2 cent sales tax is about $1 million in sales, if I'm correct on that.
A year.
I'm sorry?
A year?
Yes. If I'm correct on my math on that and remembering the figures, it's about $1 million.
And the current sales tax is what?
9.25%.
So if you made it 10%, how much would that fund the project?
In theory, I believe, yes, it could.
I don't know who's in control of the pool.
I'm sorry?
I don't know who's in control of the pool. I don't really want to know. But do we have a good pool taker? That if we build a new pool, gonna happen? What are we gonna get? What are we gonna get to vote on for who goes in and takes care of this delightful piece of earth we've created? What are we gonna get?
So, I mean, a pool manager is hired every year,
Are they qualified?
I would presume. I don't do any of the hiring or firing, so I don't know any of the qualifications
Well,
of the individual.
I'm just saying off the cuff. I'm just saying off the cuff. If you build an $800,000 house, you're gonna rent it. That's a big project, okay. Are you gonna have a manager that just goes by and checks that everyone, does the mowing, takes care, makes sure the trees are watered and the shrubberies are watered? Because a lot of renters here won't do that. They don't wanna spend their money on water. So I'm just asking off the cuff, are we gonna have some protection of our own money that we're putting out?
I believe that the staff that the city has hired does a great job in maintaining the pool as it is. I think that they've been potentially, from what I've heard from reports, been limited in the past.
Okay,
I do know that as part of the ongoing process, one of the things that we have implemented over the last year was a capital improvement fund. As part of that, we're trying to basically fund our own depreciation, which is where I think the city has failed largely over many years, is that we haven't funded our own depreciation. So when it came time to replace water lines, replace the pool, replace streets, there's no money set aside for that. It's not been budgeted for. No business operates that way. Business funds their depreciation, so
Yeah.
that they're prepared to replace what needs to be replaced. So I believe, we've set ourselves up into a position that we are not going to hopefully run into this problem again, because when it comes back around, we will have hopefully funded this fund up adequately and can maintain it as part of the budget process without having to try to find the money. It's already there, earmarked for this kind of project.
okay, thank you.
Yes,
I want to make a correction on your statement.
okay.
You don't hire and fire staff, but you do hire or fire the guy in charge of the staff.
That is correct.
Hint, hint.
Is there any guarantee that there won't be some cost overruns in this whole thing, and it'll end up costing $3 or $4 million instead of $2.5 million?
Part of that's accounted for, part of why we're going for the $3.8 million in grant funding, and then the other funding sources that we have available there is part of like the budget that we put towards that, to basically come up with that $3.8 million plus. So if there is any, if it does go over, that's covered. But we do not anticipate that it will go over.
The pool is expected to cost not more than $2.5 million in the end.
The total engineer estimate is $3.8 million, yes. Like I was saying, what we've done is we've gone through that estimation. We don't, the $60,000 fence isn't going to happen. We know that we know that we can reuse some of the existing lighting. We know we can self-perform some of the work. And when you start taking those items off, saying, okay, we can do this cheap. Because when they estimate it, do the engineer estimate, they do it as if it's a brand new, there's nothing there. So we know we can take some of those items off, and that's where ultimately it came down to about, I believe, the 2.4 to 2.6 million range, which is where the 2.5 million GO bond came from. Yes, sir.
My experience with the government, if you give them $2.5 million, they're gonna spend it if they need to or not to.
That's the city of Alva, though.
Because I know, and I always turn back, I worked for the government for many years, and I always lived within my budget, and I always took money that I didn't need, I gave it back to them. And the people above me raised hell about it, pardon my French.
Yeah, that's happening.
I mean, and that's a fair right. Nobody trusts government.
Well, what I'm saying is,
because they do that.
what I'm saying is, if you're dealing with money out of your pocket, you're gonna make it work. But if it's somebody else's money, you're not conservative enough. The other thing is, how many different type of pools have you looked at that could be constructed?
There were 5 plans considered, and then it was modified to make the 6th, which is what's presented. And yeah, that's basically exactly what I'm having to ask you to do, is to trust that we'll do with it what we say we're going to do with it. And that is that we'll use any grant funds, matching grant funds, donations, other funding sources to meet our match, and that we will put any extra money above what is necessary for the project that is put out to the people. Anything that we don't need will get paid back into the GO bond to pay it off early. We are still limited in we get the full 3.8 million grant. If it does come back and we get all 100% of it, we do have to supply 1.9 million. That 1.9 million is not necessarily all going to have to come from the GO bond. Like I said, we have other funds that we believe are available that we're hoping will come in. We've had people who have talked about donations, donating work, donating cash. And then, of course, any work we self-perform, I don't know if I said it up here, I've talked to other people about it. But any work we self-perform, so if they go in and they do the decking around the pool, and that's expected, I don't know what the actual number is, but let's say it's expected to cost $200,000 to do that decking. That's $200,000 of matching funds, in-kind funds, that we can apply. It's actually not a cash value other than the labor cost of the employees, which is already a sunk cost for us anyways. So,
Just kind of, let's change the topic kind of thing. Does any of this proposal include the parking area?
no, it's not. The parking area, as far as I've seen from the plans, is not included. Yes, sir.
In the event the grant is denied, are we then responsible to try to come up with the other half of what it would cost to build a pool?
Well, 1.9.
If the grant ends up being denied, then we're basically in the same boat. This whole proposal comes down to where the pool is still funded with or without the grant funds. The grant funds just allow us to help, even more so, reduce the burden on the taxpayer. That's part of why we went out after it, is the ability to then be able to pay back the bond, potentially early.
In one of the proposals, besides asking for the grant, this is Alva, Oklahoma, with Share Memorial Hospital, Share Library, Share Professional Building. And I've had a couple people say, well, if it doesn't pass, we'll just get the Share Trust to come in and build a new pool.
My understanding is the Share Trust has said no to that proposal. They're willing to assist with the project, but if the bond measure, and I don't want to speak for them, and I'm only hearing that hearsay, but from what I've been told is they are not willing to come in and fund the entirety of the project. If the citizens, I believe the wording I heard was if the citizens aren't willing to tax themselves for it, then they won't assist. So.
Thank you.
They have limited finances available to them as well for other projects, and so I believe that they're doing that out of protecting the trust. So.
Is that all the questions that we have?
Yes, sir.
Well, I need to add a little humor. When I was growing up, I went to the stock pond or to the river, and it didn't cost a dime. And I'm 82 years old, I'm still going.
That is true.
Things were clean back then in the rivers.
True. If there's no other questions, then